past 1:30. So welcome everybody to the North Carolina Fossil Club meeting today. We have as our speaker to lead off the program, Terry Denny. Most of you know Terry as our club secretary for the last 3 years, but she's been in the club for quite a long time and collecting fossils since a child. So let's see, she is a retired elementary school teacher. She taught for about 32 years in Lacey Elementary and other schools around the area, especially in Wake County. She also had, well, in her field, her particular field is music. So she's directed choirs and done theater work and so forth. So in her program today, I think that background will show up. She has a passion for fossils, and if you've ever gone collecting with her, you'll notice that she has a really good eye for tiny things, big things, but unusual things. So that's fun. When they moved to North Carolina in 1984 with her husband, she found her first shark teeth on Topsail Beach. She was teaching at her school in 1988, had a guest speaker, Judy Schneider, if you recognize that name. And Judy was so impressed with the students' knowledge that they'd gotten in the class that she invited Terry to go to Aurora to look for fossils. So that was kind of like a linchpin in the beginning of the paleo era of Terry's life. And since that time, she's of course been collecting a lot. So let's see. She attended a week-long seminar in North Carolina at the Center for Advancement of Teaching in Cullowhee in 1988, and after that she signed up to work in the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences downtown. She still volunteers there, or are you a paid employee?
Both, although I haven't been working since COVID started, so either way, but I will go back once they are.
That's also a nice resource for being able to identify fossils and so forth. So she does a lot of prep work there. Okay, so in 2004, she went on an educator trip to Alberta, and her talk today is called Hunting Dinosaurs in Alberta, and it is about that trip. Terry, it's all yours.
Great. Before I start my slideshow, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about the trip. It was an Educator of Excellence trip, which means that it was an application process and only 12 teachers in the state were selected. And of the 12 teachers, we were all different grade levels and experience levels. And I was really the only person with any background in fossils other than the museum leaders. And the trip went to Alberta, where we had a chance to do a dinosaur dig and lots of things, which I'm going to tell you about. And the most exciting part is, of course, how it impacted me as I changed my whole philosophy of collecting once I went on this trip, because it was all about the story the landscape tells, the story the bone beds tell, the story of the ecosystem that was there in Alberta. So as I begin my presentation, I'm going to share those stories, and hopefully it will inspire you the way it inspired me. And I also met my good friend Cheryl Gorley on this trip, and she is now a member of the Fossil Club as well. But let me get my presentation started, and hopefully, you know, we can get into this whole adventure that 12 educators and 3 museum staff had in 2004 in beautiful Alberta, Canada. Okay, share screen. right, come on. It takes some, there we go. Please let me know if you have trouble hearing or seeing anything. Uh-oh. Screen sharing is closed. Let me try again. Sorry guys, little technical issue. I'll get it up in a second. My PowerPoint closed.
Terry, you've gone on mute. There you go.
Hear me now?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, can you see me?
We see you. We haven't seen your presentation yet.
I know it hasn't started and I can't see you guys either, so I'm trying to figure out why. All I see is a screen that says Zoom. All right, well, here we go. I'm trying now to see if I can share my screen. Technology is great when it works.
Remember, technology is our friend.
Yes. Okay.
When in doubt, get out of the meeting, come back in and start it up again.
All right. I'm going to do that. Hold on. I can't share the screen. Something's wrong with the Zoom picture. Yeah. All right. I'm seeing this still on the side. I don't know why. I can't seem to get out of this and I can't seem to start it again. Oh, there we go. All right. Hang on. And hopefully this is going to work now.
There, it's starting.
Success.
Yay. All right. My problem now is the little screen at the top keeps showing and it won't get out of the way for me to start my PowerPoint. This worked so nicely when we did this a half an hour ago. Okay. Oh, I hate this.
So Terry, what you may want to do is go ahead and start it and then do the screen sharing.
Well, my problem is my PowerPoint closed, so I have to open it again.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And that was the issue. All right. Now, I've got it open. All right, now I should be able to share. Yes. There we go. And share sound, yes, it's all on there. All right. From the beginning. Yeah.
Blue tells you push the button to start.
Yes, got it. Okay, it should be starting now, hopefully. It just takes a second, I know. There we go. Does everybody see a black screen?
Yes.
Okay. We should be starting now. Sorry about that. Technology is just our friend only when it works right.
You're fine, Terry.
Yeah. Now, I decided to have that music at the beginning because during this trip, Dr. Russell had not ever heard the music to Jurassic Park, so I shared the CD with him, and he loved it and shared it with his grandkids afterwards. So I felt it was a fitting tribute to him as I began this talk today. We met in Raleigh, and our 12 teachers and 3 museum leaders flew to Calgary via Chicago to start our adventure. And the first thing we did was load into some vans to head to Drumheller, which was going to be our first stop on our trip. So we left Calgary and reached Drumheller. But before we actually got into the town, we stopped at Horseshoe Canyon to talk about the stratigraphy of the region. And this was really important because as we were going to be embarking on this adventure, we were going to be learning a lot about the area and why the geography and geology was the way it was. And so this is what we saw when we got to Horseshoe Canyon. And as you can see, it's a Badlands, and I don't know what was in my brain, but I honestly didn't realize that there were Badlands in Canada, just like in the US. I don't know why I was thinking that. But what you're looking at here are, of course, a lot of layers, and most of this was exposed at the end of the Ice Age when glacial melt came through and the sediments were very soft, so it eroded most of this out at that point in time. And we got to see the black lines there are all different coal deposits from plant material that had built up over time. And then each of these layers, of course, represents different time periods. The top layer is about 1.5 million years or so before the end of the Cretaceous. So, you know, I had been hoping to see the KT boundary, but that was already long eroded before this exposure was here. But this is what we were going to see everywhere we went around Drumheller. And the late Cretaceous in Alberta, of course, was located along the inland sea, and it was a sort of similar climate to the southeastern United States at the time. So the type of plant life and the type of ecosystem there would have had some similarity to the southeastern United States. And here's a little sign that was there that told us a little bit about the landscape. And it was the Red Deer River that is still cutting through that area that helped to create most of the runoff. And I'll give you guys a second to read this. And of course, you can probably go back and look at it too later on. Now, here's a picture of me and Dr. Russell and one of the other participants, you know, as we had finished listening to our talk and we were just sort of enjoying the view and looking at the different rock layers. It was amazing to me that there was so much of this in this area of Alberta, the southeastern part of the province. Driving into Drumheller was also a really big adventure. Okay, there we go. And whoops, sorry, too many slides. We found out that many of the species that were found there were ankylosaurs, ceratopsians, microraptors, ornithomimes, ornithopods, and tyrannosaurs, Albertosaurus being one of them, of course. There were also other finds in the area, different mammals and non-dinosaur reptiles like crocodiles and amphibians, and fish and plant fossils. So there were lots of things. And we were going to get to see a lot of this when we got to the Royal Tyrrell Museum, which is exclusively a paleontology museum. We took a ferry to cross the Red Deer River, which had carved the canyon, and got a chance to see the water.
So ferry, cross the Mersey, 'cause this land's the place I love, and here I'll stay.
So just a little musical fun there to talk about the ferry. When you get to Drumheller, people have dinosaur fever there. And why not? That's what's in their backyards everywhere. And this is the entrance to the town. They have this lovely little Albertosaurus sign, and lots of badlands all around the town. And T-Rex in the world, which is of course much larger than reality, is this statue in Drumheller. We got to go see it, but we did not get to go up in the mouth. If you have a chance to do that, it's 95 feet tall and you can get quite a view from up there, from what I understand. But we were limited in time because it was sort of late in the day when we got there, but we got to see, you can see the people standing below at the very bottom. So this is a very impressive large T-Rex. And all around the town, you see statues of dinosaurs. Here's a man sitting on a park bench, and there's a dinosaur looking over his shoulder. If you go grocery shopping, there's the dinosaur popping out of the grocery store. So it's definitely dinosaur land everywhere around there. And that got us excited for what we were going to be doing in the next couple of days. Our hotel was the Jurassic Inn, and had the iconic little gateway, just like the movie, which is another reason for using Jurassic Park music. And the landscape right around there, we got a chance to go out and look at some of the rocks and explore behind the hotel. And if you went across the street, you could see some interesting erosion. And this is our hotel, and this is what's right behind it, this great big hill. So anyway, we spent the night, and the next day we were going to go on a day dig with the museum. So basically they had a bone bed of duckbill dinosaurs, and we were going to help excavate. And we saw some hoodoos around the town, lots of erosion showing the badlands. And this was the soil, made mostly of glauconite particles. If you ever get on that when it's wet, it is the most slippery slope and very, very treacherous. And that was going to prove to be a disappointment to us later because of some rain, but I'll get to that as we go through chronologically. So, and they have these great statues outside and fountains, but we didn't go in the museum yet because we were going to load into some vans and head out to the Badlands. So we got to the day dig, and we got out of the vans and got some instructions, and you can kind of see right over here, that's my friend Cheryl Gorley. And up here, we were going to be hiking up into these hills to the site where the dig was located.
Believe me, you got to get up early if you want to get out of bed.
So overlooking the dig, this was a really interesting contrast to all of this fossil layer. We have a big statue of Jesus that's 40 feet tall that's looking over the Badlands. Apparently there used to be some kind of statues out here that people would visit, and this one was still there. So Dr. Russell remarked on how interesting that was to be overlooking us at this point. They were bringing some plaster jackets back from the field at the time that we were there, so we watched them load those into their vans as we started our hike out to the bone bed. This was our first sight of the bone bed. It was quite an extensive area of hadrosaurs that had all been buried at a specific point in time, and later we were going to talk about why that might have happened. And we were going to help work on this site. And so each of us...
The foot bone's connected to the leg bone's connected to the knee bone's connected to the thigh bone, doing the skeleton dance.
So of course, if I was going to do a lesson with my little kindergartners, I might use that song, but one of our friends put a camera lens here so we could just get a general idea of the size of these vertebrae. And here's the femur of one of the dinosaurs, the Edmontosaurus, and some different rib bones that we saw on, around the other side. And of course, they talked to us about watching where we walked, because everywhere you stepped around there, you could easily step on one of the bones. So we were given a spot that we could choose to start working, and then we were going to get the tools, and they came around and sort of talked to us about how they wanted us to had everything in grids, and they were not only marking out the grid in terms of longitude and latitude, but they were the grid in terms of depth in the layers, so that when you found anything interesting, they would come and mark all those measurements before removing it from the. And so here's our group getting to work, and everybody's found their spot. And you can see they've been digging down into several different layers in order to get to where we would be excavating. Dr. Russell came over to each of us and gave us some pointers on what to look for. And you can see that they took like bleach bottles and cut the bottoms out and made scoops so we could brush the sediment into the scoops and then put them in buckets to be taken away. There's Cheryl hard at work and her spot with her brush and digging tools. And another view. And of the group, I had the most exciting finds. The first one, after I brushed through some dirt and exposed some more bone, I found an Edmontosaurus tooth, which after we marked the grid, they let me hold it long enough to take a photo. So I was able to measure that. And that was the only tooth of an Edmontosaurus that we found that day. So that was very exciting. And I had found some hadrosaur teeth in North Carolina previous to this. So that was exciting to me because it related to something that I had found here. And so it was nice to have that comparison. And there it was marking the grid for some other things that were found, some different bone fragments, etc. And then I found an Albertosaurus tooth. And I was very pleased to learn that that was the first Albertosaurus tooth that had been found at that site. So that gave us a little clue that it either was scavenged or there was some predation that may have happened. So that to me was really exciting. And this tooth was not in very great shape, but it was proof that Albertosaurus had been there as well. So I was very excited about that. After we spent a half a day doing the dig, we were taken on a hike across the Badlands, and we got to see more up close what the terrain looked like, some of the different layers. And some of it was really hard to take because they talked about in Alberta, it is illegal to collect fossils. The only exception to that is you can get permit to collect plants and ammonites. But as far as anything else is concerned, even if it's your own property, it belongs to the state. And therefore, you know, it's severe punishment if you take any fossils from any of these sites. The museum was allowed to collect, but nobody else. So we saw several really nice looking fossil deposits, and we were told, well, the museum has a lot of those, so we're just going to leave them there. We're not going to collect them. We'll just let them erode away. And that's really heartbreaking because, you know, I'm sure there are lots of people who could use these fossils, but oh well, they're off limits. That's the way that goes. And it also was ironic to me that when we went into the towns, there were a couple of rock shops and they were selling fossils from Montana. So I kind of thought that wasn't very fair, but you know, that's the way it goes. Anyway, we hiked up some really interesting rock formations, and you can see a lot of different layers up close. And here was a hadrosaur backbone just laid out, and it's going to be left to weather away because they don't want any more hadrosaurs. They have plenty of them. And so we put a pocket knife out just to get the dimensions in and took some pictures, and sadly walked away from it. Some little hoodoos that we saw, we just thought those were cute. They were just little tiny ones. And everyone had a chance to really kind of go off on your own a little bit, see what you could see and come back and share with the group. And we found some fossils and modern bones, and Dr. Russell kind of put these in a little pile so we could see there was some petrified wood and some little pieces of bone. And then here's a little modern bone down here of an animal that died recently. And, you know, so you can kind of look at history unfolding in front of you. That evening, Dr. Russell paired up with Dr. David Eberth from the Museum of the Royal Tyrrell to give us a talk about the bone beds of Dinosaur Provincial Park, which we were going to visit in a couple of days. And apparently there are a lot of Centrosaurus bones, and there are just huge numbers of them that were all buried at the same time. So the two of them were going to talk to us about what happened to create these bone beds. You know, what was the theory related to it? And so that was, to me, a very interesting talk. And because this was with the museum in Raleigh, there were lots of connections being made between Alberta and North Carolina. We had hadrosaurs. We had some of the same types of dinosaurs or similar ones here at the same time. And the climates were very similar. And of course, at this point in time in late Cretaceous, Alberta was on the coast of the inland sea. So this area was a low-lying valley that was subject to the same kind of weather that we get here. And so when they were looking to make some conclusions about these bone beds, they did some looking at our climate as well. There were also other topics that were discussed in the lecture. As Dr. Russell pointed out, evolution accelerates and it's not linear. You know, it's more like a web. Dinosaurs are younger than us biogenetically. Dinosaurs are not diverse, no matter their size. There's a lot of similarity in all the different species. He said evolution isn't random and is adaptive, which, you know, we see as we, you know, look at different ecosystems in different time periods. It's got, life has to survive with the conditions that are there. So it has to adapt to the changes. And then the theories of why the large bone beds of centrosaurs occur. And, whoops, sorry. There was a flood event similar to the recent hurricanes that killed herds of cows and pigs in North Carolina. So what they had done was they looked at cows and pigs that were drowned in Hurricane Fran and Floyd and some of those large storms that affected eastern North Carolina. And they noticed that when the waters receded, the remains of some of the animals, farm animals, kind of jumbled up and fell into the same kind of patterns that they saw in the center source bone beds. So they did some more study and looked at the sediments and concluded that just like the cows and pigs died in a big storm and flood, this bone bed of centrosaurs in Dinosaur Provincial Park most likely met the same fate. They most likely had a storm come, and there were just so many of them, and they just washed into this area and were drowned and covered up quickly and fossilized. Dr. Russell also talked about where there's evidence of ecosystems throughout time in the world today. You can find evidence of the Precambrian in Antarctica, the Paleozoic in the Northwest Territories of Canada, the Mesozoic in New Caledonia, the Cretaceous. You can look at swamp ecosystems today in Florida and other places and see similar types of ecosystems. And of course, the present day evolution in tropical rainforests that is continuing to happen and the diversity of species there. So he was trying to give an overview of, what the fossil records can show us. Then we took a tour the next day of the Royal Tyrrell Museum and got to see some of the interesting specimens there. Huge museum, and I just showed a few highlights, but there are online tours that you can do, and other venues where you can get to see pictures of many of the things that Tyrrell has. But it is exclusively paleontology, so everything there is related to that, and of course a great deal of it is related to the area of Alberta, but they also have things from British Columbia and other time periods. Now, in addition to going through the regular exhibits, we also got to go behind the scenes. Wow! And we started with this gigantic ammonite, and then continued to go through different places in the museum. They have so much stuff, and a lot of it has not been prepped yet. They're just jackets everywhere and all kinds of specimens, and it was just overwhelming to go back there. I mean, I know our museum in Raleigh has a lot, but nothing like this. It just went on, and we were just so impressed with everything they had to show us. This was a recent Edmontosaurus skull that had been prepped, that had been dug up from, I think it was from the site where we actually were working. They had a lot of mosasaurs because, of course, the inland sea was not far from that area. And they talked about some research that they did with the mosasaur, because they had found a lot of ammonites with holes in them. And someone had theorized that looks like the bite mark of a mosasaur. I wonder if that's what caused these holes. So they decided to do some experiments. They created a mosasaur jaw.
Feed me now! I'm starving!
And they decided that they are going to test it on some ammonites and see if the bite mark matched the holes in the ammonites. Well, they quickly found out that was not the case, that all it did was crush the ammonites. And so they finally concluded that no, the mosasaurs did not eat the ammonites. Some other kind of predatory animal, like perhaps a drill snail type creature, is what made the holes in the ammonites. And here we are taking a look. We had a chance to just sort of look through some of the different shelves and see all the different specimens they had and take some notes. We kept field journals while we were on our trip too, so that we could write down the information and interesting things that we discovered along the way. There's a close-up look at that hadrosaur skull that we saw a little while ago. And we got to see them do their fossil prep. As you probably can see, their prep labs are much larger than ours as well. They had a lot more space. Then the next thing we had that afternoon was a fossil casting class. And this intrigued me too, because we got a chance to make some casts of some of the specimens they had, and we got to keep those. We couldn't keep any real specimens, but at least we got some casts. So of course we were making them out of plaster, and they had a lot of different things that we could choose to make a cast of. And they had a lot of rubber molds that they had made out of latex rubber. And of course, then we mixed the plaster, and here's some examples of some of the different casts that we were going to come out with at the end. So I decided, I even got a chance to go with the museum later on and do a casting class at the North Carolina Science Conference that following November, because you know, I had learned how to do this myself at home. I got some mold maker, which you can buy at Michael's. And of course, people now want to do 3D printing, but you may not always have access to that. This is something that you can do also. And this kind of mold maker, you can use the molds over and over again. You just coat your specimen with ivory. And I borrowed everybody's casts and made my own molds so I could do them again. And you paint this stuff on it and you let it dry. And you add a little cheesecloth to make it strong. And you paint a little more, you cut the edges. And then when it's dry, you peel it off and you've got a beautiful mold that you can make a cast. And in fact, I made a bunch of casts that I was going to give away at the talk if we were actually in person. And I will still have these, and I will bring them the next time we are in person. So, and I've painted mine, but these are unpainted. So if you got any of them, you could paint them yourself. But you can make them look just like the actual specimen. And even with the ammonite, because the ammonites have this iridescence, I put some iridescent nail polish on the outside of it to make it look like the ammonite specimens. And that actually worked really well. It just gave it a little bit of shimmer. But these are some of the different ones that we did. We had eurypterids, we had, this is an ornithomimus toe bone, different shark teeth, trilobites, ammonite. This is a claw from Troodon. So we got some really interesting specimens. And you know, these are some of the ones, as I said, that I made to give away. So later on, if you're interested in any of these, you can contact me if you want, and I can save them for you, or you can get them the next time we actually have a live in-person meeting, because I will bring them. This place was just a cute store, another dinosaur related thing that I thought I would throw into the presentation, because everywhere around us we just saw dinosaur related things. Now, after we finished our tour of the Royal Tyrrell, we headed from Drumheller and we were going to go to Brooks to Dinosaur Provincial Park. And so that was a little bit southeast of where we were. We left Calgary, went to Drumheller, and then went to Dinosaur Provincial Park. This was at the entrance, and this told a little bit about the different parts of the park. There are trails that you can walk on. There is a field station there, and there are lots of exhibits that you can see, as well as a drive-through where you can kind of just drive and look at the different scenery. This was the entrance to the park. And when you first get there, you just see this flat grassy area, but as you get closer, you discover that it's actually a big canyon, very much like Horseshoe Canyon. So here we have more of those wonderful badlands to look at. And of course, we had to get our group to make a little pose, like we were falling off the cliff. but really nobody fell. But we had a little fun making our drama there as we were getting ready to go in and explore the park. We went to the field station and had a chance to explore there a little bit. And we were supposed to take a hike to the Centrosaurus bone bed. However, as you can see, the sky was very dark. It had rained. That was the most disappointing part of our trip. We were not able to go to the bone bed because the glauconite was impossible to pass through after the rain. So we had to kind of make a change of plan, and we got to talk about the bone beds, but we never really got to see the huge Centrosaurus bone bed. But we did a lot of other things. So we toured through the field station where they had a lot more exhibits, lots of different specimens that came from Dinosaur Provincial Park itself. And here's one of the skulls of one of the Centrosaurs, which is a ceratopsian, and it has these large holes in the frill, which, you know, no one really knows exactly what that was for, other than perhaps, you know, some sort of coloration. And they had lots of different posed skeletons to kind of show interaction between the species at the field station. Two of us were lucky enough that we happened to be right in the right place at the right time, and Dr. Russell said, quick, come here. And we got to go into the lab and see them bring in the latest specimens they had just excavated from the park. So I was very lucky that I got to go in and we got to talk to the people who were working in the field station and out on the field, and they were bringing in more Centrosaur bones, and we got to watch them open the jacket and reveal the bone they had just brought in. So I felt very lucky to get to do that and see more of the prep work going on, since I had been doing some in Raleigh too, and so I learned some tricks from them about what they were doing. Then we went and saw this little bone bed inside a shelter. They had sort of built this little building and preserved this small bone bed, so we did get to see that, even though we didn't get to see the big one. And then we took a little hike and took a drive. This is a hoodoo called the Starship Enterprise Hoodoo, and you can see why they call it that. I can see the resemblance. I think you can too. So that was one of my favorite hoodoos that we saw, being a little Star Trek fan myself. So we also saw this cabin. This was a pioneer who lived in Dinosaur Provincial Park before it was a park. His name was John Ware, and they have his house preserved, so you can kind of see a little bit of the human history of the area as well. And then we took a hike and we got to hug a great big 200-year-old cottonwood tree, which was growing in the area. There were quite a few of those large trees. So we didn't see a bone bed, but we saw some really cool trees. After we left Dinosaur Provincial Park, most of the dinosaur part of our trip was over, although we were going to make some connections along the way. And we did do some other things that I wanted to share as well, because if you headed up to Alberta, you would want to experience some of these other things as well. We went to a Native American heritage site in Lethbridge. And from there, you could actually see into the US, and you could see some of the mountains in Glacier National Park, because Waterton Glacier are right down here. And so from the highlands up here, you could see those mountains, which I thought was very interesting. But this site was a site where the Native Americans, the Blackfeet, actually ran buffalo or bison off the cliff to get their food for the winter. And this was called head smashed in buffalo jump. So we got to learn a little bit about the prehistoric human history. And they had lots of skulls there. And we learned how the meat was processed and how the people lived. Dr. Russell got up close to the, and if he was getting run over, We saw some dances and heard some music. And then we got to walk outside to the actual buffalo jump, which is where this all took place. And they actually had prehistoric teepee rings on the ground below, which we got to go and stand on and experience the exact spot where a lot of this happened. We got to taste pemmican, which is a dried form of the meat that they would save for the winter time, and just get an idea of what life would have been like for these people. After we did that, then we headed to a very different landscape. We went to the mountains. And we headed to Canmore, which is right outside of Banff National Park. And we talked a little bit about the mountains. Now, the Rocky Mountains that were outside of Canmore were in a mountain building stage during the late Cretaceous. They started about 80 million years ago and were forming up until 55 million years ago, where a number of tectonic plates are moving. So the dinosaurs that we were looking at in Dinosaur Provincial Park would have been alive during the time these mountains were building, and all these geologic changes were happening. And so we got a chance to see a lot of different scenes of mountains, and we took a hike in Johnson Canyon. Now, this was a great hike where we talked a lot about different types of ecosystems and different types of geological formations. And during this trip, each one of us had a chance to walk and talk with Dr. Russell, and this ended up being my opportunity. And after we went up the canyon and saw the waterfall, we went past it, and up at the top, we came upon this little area where equisetum was growing. And Dr. Russell was talking about how this is a prehistoric plant. It's a type of horsetail, and we had a lot of those growing in North Carolina. And he said to me, just listen. And there was no one around, and the only sounds we heard were insects, and then we heard some birds. And he said, take the birds out of the equation, and you are in a Mesozoic ecosystem. We have conifers, and we have equisetum, and we have a lot of insects. And he said, you could imagine right around the corner, you might see a dinosaur just munching away on some of the plants, or you might just hear something in the distance and it would be the call of a dinosaur. So to me, that was really cool. And then I knew that I had a couple of specimens of some prehistoric plants like that. This is, someone gave this to me, but it is called an annularia. It is from a plant similar to equisetum. And then I hear some horsetails that came from the boring clay pit. So these are plants, this is Triassic, but you may have had similar plants still in the late Cretaceous. This is Mount Rundle, which is right outside, and you can really see how this would have been the surface, and this whole mountain was just lifted up as the tectonic plates hit together, and it just sort of turned the landscape on its side. We did some other fun things too. We went to a dinner theater show called Oh Canada A, and I will admit that for 2 weeks after I got back from Canada, I said A quite a few times because we heard it everywhere and it sort of sticks with you. But that was fun, and we got to hear the history of, you know, the pioneers and the Rocky Mountain, the Mounties, and we did see Mounties around quite a bit. We got to see one of their headquarters. And we did see a lot of wildlife on our different road trips. We saw the little prairie dogs, and here's a raven nest, and here's a magpie. We saw elk, we saw marmots. So there were opportunities to see the wildlife, as well as talk about the prehistoric ecosystems. We also did some whitewater rafting on our last day, and it was very cold. The water was just above freezing, and we went down the rapids on the river in the Rockies there, and we also got to stop in Calgary and go to the Glenbow Museum. They had some really cool ammonites there too. The beautiful colors were just amazing to me. And we saw the Olympic Park where the Olympics had been, and had a chance to just visit a little bit of Calgary before we got on our plane to head home. I did have some books and things that I was going to have on display. So I wanted to just take a picture of some of those too, about the Badlands and about the dinosaurs in the Badlands and the geology. And this was Dr. Russell's book about dinosaurs in North America, some brochures of different places that we went to. So unfortunately, you know, I wasn't able to share those, but I like the cast, I will bring them to a future meeting when we're together. So if people want to take a look during a break or something, or before the meeting, you can have a chance to do that. We also kept journals, and I just took a few pictures of some of the things I wrote in my journal, because I documented everything we saw, did some pictures, took pictures from brochures and flyers and taped them into the book, and just tried to keep a record of everything that we had learned. So, questions, anyone?
I had thought that the meeting was at 2 and ended up missing about the first 30 minutes. Did I miss anything? What did I miss?
A lot about Alberta, but hopefully this has been recorded so that you could catch it when they post it.
Yes, this has been recorded and will be put out there in a way people can watch it. It was also live streamed to the North Carolina Fossil Club Facebook page. So you should be able to go there and catch the beginning of it as well.
Thank you.
I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or everybody was muted at the beginning of the presentation, so you might need to unmute yourself.
Well, Terry, this was really a very nice presentation, complete with music and all.
Well, you know, I had to do both things because I do both things. So, and I think what really inspired me to do that is the whole idea that the fossils tell a story, and we are storytellers ourselves, and so music and drama and special effects add to the story and add to the experience. And so I felt like that might be a fun way to include that in the presentation, sort of enhance that whole idea that we're not just looking at cool specimens, but we're looking at the story that they tell us and learning from them. You know, what were we've never seen any of these ecosystems or these animals in real life, but what we can learn from the fossils can tell us a lot about what they were like. So it's always about the story. And I didn't think of it that way until after I took this trip, because, you know, Dr. Russell was a great storyteller. When he would explain things, it was a story. And so after that, I looked at it that way much more than I had before.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any other comments that anyone wants to make? Maybe if you stop sharing